Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome along to tonight's podcast. You just bear with me a couple of seconds, I'll just sharing it into a couple of groups and getting organised because we are using StreamYard tonight, and unfortunately, for some reason, when you're using StreamYard, we can't see who's making the comments. So I've got my phone there ready just in case as well. But anyway, welcome along to tonight's podcast. It's podcast number 53 that I've done in the short couple of years that I've been doing podcasts. And tonight, my guest is my good friend who I met in recovery, Miss Tracy Hadlow. And I'll get to introduce Tracy in a second. Before we go on, I'd just like to welcome you all to tonight's podcast and to also put out a little trigger warning because we are talking about difficult subjects tonight. Tracy is going to be coming in and sharing her story of her son Nathan, who sadly lost his life to an accidental overdose back in March 2021 at only 20-year-old. But we'll hear about Tracy and Nathan's family story very shortly. But before we get into that, I would like to put out that trigger warning. If you've been through similar issues of addiction, mental health, suicide, loss, or grief, then it may trigger you. And if you are triggered, then I would suggest that you stop watching the live and ground yourself in whatever way that you find necessary. One of the ways that I like to use is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, and that is the way to do that is it's 5 things round about you that you can see. So maybe if you're standing next to a window, you can see trees or an animal outside or something in your living room or bedroom, etc. So try and find 5 things round about you to ground you back into the present moment. Also, you can look for 4 things around you that you can touch, depending where you are. And remember that you're one of these things already is your feet touching the ground, so that's you grounding yourself as well. Then you can listen for 3 things round about you. That may be your TV, birds outside, anything type of noise whatsoever. Try and listen for 3 things round about you. And then you can 2 things that you can smell. So I don't know, the neighbours might be cooking, or you can smell the grass or the rain or whatever it may be. And then 1 thing, if possible, that you can taste. Then go and get yourself a cup of tea or a sweet snack or something, whatever it may be. And that will help bring you back into the present moment, and it will stop any triggers that may happen. But ultimately, I would say come away from the podcast and watch it when you're in a better headspace. But if you are triggered, then please reach out to myself or Tracy after the live, and we'll get back to you in touch with you, and we'll put you in touch with various different support options that we're both part of and that are available out there at the moment. There is also a couple of helpline numbers that I'd like to give that I use on the podcasts. The first one being Samaritans, which is 116 123. That's 116 123. And also Breathing Space, which is 0800 83 85 87. That's 0800 83 85 87. So if you are triggered and the grounding techniques don't work for you and you need further support, then there's myself and Tracy out there, but there's also the admins and all the various groups that we're all part of as well. And there's a couple of helpline numbers there as well. But yeah, so tonight I'm pleased to be joined by my good friend in recovery, Miss Tracy Hadlow. And Tracy, I've known Tracy for about 2.5 years now, and maybe even 3 years, I believe. Well, maybe not quite as long as 3 years, but 2.5 years I've known Tracy now. And we met under unusual circumstances, I'd say probably. We'll get into that later on in the podcast, but we met actually because both of us done a story in Edinburgh Live. Me telling my story about the fake Valium that were out there in the streets that I was using at the time, and Tracy to raise awareness of our son Nathan, who sadly passed away whilst having these fake Valium in his system. And it was to raise awareness of what the dangers, obviously, the ultimate danger that Tracy paid by losing her beautiful son. So that's what we're here to discuss tonight. Tracy's going to tell us Nathan's story and her family's story. So please feel free to put any comments you may have in there and I'll put them up on the screen. Like I say, it does say Facebook user when you put a comment up, but I've got my phone beside me and I can tell Tracy who the comments are coming from. But what I'm going to do now, for those of you that know me, I'm going to be quiet, which is something unusual. I'm going to listen to my friend and pass you over to Tracy. But first of all, thank you, Tracy, for coming along tonight and for sharing Nathan's story. I know it's a difficult thing to talk about for a lot of people, but I know that you also find a lot of inspiration and passion in telling Nathan's story to both keep his memory alive, but also to help break any stigma and to help anybody else out there that may be suffering in similar ways after losing a loved one to overdose or anyway, actually suicide, whatever the case may be. So it's over to you, Mrs. And thank you again for coming on.
Thanks, Willie. Firstly, can I just say, in case my dog starts to bark or growl or whatever, she's just a puppy. An annoying puppy, but she's still a puppy. You said you were going to be quiet.
I know.
So anyway, my name is Tracy, and my story starts when I was when I had 3 children. When my marriage split up, my daughter was 2, my son Nathan was 5, and my other son was 10. So when that happened, obviously that affected Nathan in a big way. So I guess that was the first real trauma in his life. He was a brilliant kid, really academic, could read before he went to go to school. He was popular at school with all the girls. He just loved life when he was a kid. And he won a few competitions. The Easter bonnet competition, he won that one year. And then he came second the following year. He was just really outgoing. He would turn his hand to anything. If I needed any help in the house, he was the one to do it. I was really crap at cooking, and he used to cook from the age of about 10 years old. He would make everybody's dinner. He was pretty self-sufficient. He was always out on his skateboard or his scooter, or he was an outdoor kid. He hated being inside. Hated it. He lived outside with all his pals, and we lived 3 minutes from the school, so it was perfect. He was right by the house. He used to stand up at the stairs and meet his pals. And later on, when he was a teenager, that's where he made some of his deals with the drugs. And, his pals used to call it Hadlow's Path. And it's been like two and a bit years since Nathan died, and the purple ribbons are still on the fence up at the stairs, the poles. So it's nice to see when I walk past. So Nathan was a great kid. He really was. His brother was really quiet, and his sister was very wild, is the word I would say. So it was full on as being a single parent to 3 children. My marriage ended after 13 years, and the kids had a really inconsistent time of seeing their dad and not seeing their dad. Nothing to do with me. It was just the way he was. So he used to see the kids whenever he was able to, or whenever he could be bothered. But that sounds a bit mean on my part, but I never stopped him seeing his kids. And to this day, like, the only thing I'm going to say about him is that we'll never speak to him again. And that was for one reason only. The reason being that he didn't turn up to his son's funeral. And we were married, we were a family. All 3 kids were his, and he wasn't there to support his other kids, who were absolutely distraught about that. And I don't mind mentioning that online, because from the time that I knew he wasn't going to come to the funeral, and the fact that he said you should have tried harder, that was it. I just finished it. I wasn't going to communicate with him anymore, or speak to him. Throughout Nathan's life, Nathan used to reach out to him, but he would always get a knock back. And right to the very end, his dad wasn't there, which was really sad. It was sad for my other kids who wanted him there, and it was sad for, well, it would have been sad for Nathan, knowing that even when he died, his dad couldn't be bothered coming to his funeral. He went for a walk along the beach instead, to gather his thoughts, which was quite sad. You know, as Nathan grew up, we went holidays, and one of the favourite places we liked to go when we found out about it was Flamingoland, and I used to take the kids there. I also took them to Paris, to France, to the, oh God, what's it called, Willie?
Disney World.
Disney World, yeah, to Disneyland. Took them over there, and they loved that as well. But Nathan was starting to become like sort of like cheeky, I'd say, and like not telling me things. So he was a bit difficult on that holiday as he was approaching the age. I think he was 12. And then he had finished primary school, and he was starting high school. And it was when he started high school that things started to go wrong. He stayed the night with people, with a friend that whose parents were into cannabis, and he'd never been, you know, like in that situation before. So he had that, and then he was also getting bullied. So, like, the older peer group stepped in to help him, and he thought that they were cool, that they were great, that, you know, like, let's hang about with them. I've got older friends. So he started to hang about with them. He started to go missing overnight, and would be, you know, quite far away. And I'd be sitting at the window crying my eyes out, thinking, where is he? You know, why is he not coming home? You know, what's the issue? Police would bring him back, and he would come in and he would go straight back out again. But obviously you've got to keep an eye on your kids before they're 16. You know, apparently I could get done with abandonment if I just left them and never reported anything. So I did go to the police about Nathan, you know, and the cannabis, because I felt like he was running about with it, and he was probably like a runner for the drugs. I don't know, but I suspect he was. He was just so, he never really told me anything. And then his electric guitar started to go missing. His TV sold at the pub. All his things that he just sold. His PlayStation and everything. Over the years, he would like just put holes in my doors and my walls. There'd be drug dealers coming at the door for his tip money, and sometimes we paid them, and then we stopped. Then we stopped. His brother got really like upset with the people that would come to the door, and on one occasion he went to the bank to withdraw the money out to pay it for Nathan, and the guy followed him all the way there and back. It was horrible, eh? You know, my older son felt really like he was quiet, so he got kind of anxious and stressed out in that. The drug dealers would come to the door, they'd be screaming through the letterbox looking for him. They'd be hammering on my front door, putting it in, breaking my windows. They broke my back fence, my gate, threw boulders at my house, and it was just terrible. My neighbours hated it all. They just, you know, gradually they would stop talking to me, you know, because Nathan caused that much hassle, and they couldn't deal with it. And well, I couldn't deal with it either. But it just kept on coming. The police came to the door, you know, and the police would come to the door, and I would get some, most of them were really nice to me. Some were like, you just keep an eye on your kid, but I didn't know what else to do. So I went along to WellDAS, which is West Lothian Drug and Alcohol Service, when Nathan was I think he was about 14 when I started going there. And I quickly realised that it wasn't going to be a quick fix with Nathan. It was, my troubles weren't going to be over. But what I did find was that I got a lot of support out of that group, a lot of support from other parents, from other families. And like over the years, I've learned to support people that were in my position in the first place. And hopefully their kids won't die. Nathan was 16. My daughter was in the hospital on life support due to appendicitis operations, and he was putting ladders through my walls and punching holes in my doors. And just my house was a wreck when I came back. I'd spent 5 weeks in the sick kids, and I was absolutely knackered. And that was like that was in the February. So I was still trying to get my daughter back to health, and I was also trying to get back to work. So I think I went back to work in the May, and in June the police turned up and they gave me an ASBO. My neighbours had all complained about Nathan that much that they were going to give me one, and that was it. Well, obviously I was devastated. I just thought, I work in the NHS, I can't have this, because you get charged, that's it. I could lose my job.
Mm-hmm.
And you could get charged from this. But what I didn't realise is that you don't have an ASBO for very long. I can't remember how long it is, but it's no more than 6 months anyway. I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, I told Nathan that I couldn't handle him anymore. I couldn't cope with him. So he had to go into homelessness. So I took him there and dropped him off, and he came back. So he was obviously really upset, but he was always telling me that he couldn't wait till he was 16 so that he could just leave and get away from us all, because we were all horrible. But really, we weren't horrible. He was just being bravado. So anyway, took him back again, and he stayed, and he went through the system. He had a lot of support from various organisations. Nathan was a good lad. He was respectful. My family were just talking about him today. He would always say hello to you. He would always say thanks. If you dropped him off anywhere, or if you were in the house, he would speak to you. He was good. I hated the one talk, the I want to do this, that, and I just used to drive me nuts, especially when his pals saw me, and they would say, "Oh, there's Nathan's old Mo." Oh God, I hated it, So I used to get a row all the time when he says, "I'm at my Mo's on the phone." I would, give him into trouble for it, and he would take the trouble. He wouldn't be bothered, he'd just accept it. So 16, he was away and he got taken into Pullman. He was in for 10 days. It was a total shock to the system. And he was let out on the basis that he would stay at my house with no discussion with me. So it was a court thing, and I was absolutely livid. I was just coming out of sick kids after an appointment to find out that Nathan would be staying with us, and it was going to be all up in the air again. So, I was actually going crackers. It took me about a month, I think, to sort it out, because he really was terrible. He would wake up in the middle of the night if he ever went to sleep at all, and he'd be going up to do deals somewhere, but he'd leave my windows and my doors open. He'd have the window open all night in the winter, you know, heating the street. He would, like, nobody would break into my house, you know, that's what he'd say. But yeah, anyway, 17 came and he was back in Pullman again for this time it was 21 months. Drugs offences and obviously stealing to cope with the habit as well. So he had started on cannabis, and then he had progressed to ecstasy. And, you know, the kids had all got bored one night prior to all this, and it all went up a hill near myself called Deckman Hill, and he had gone up there with the kids, and they'd all, like, raided their mum's cabinets to see if they could get high, and they had alcohol on them and everything. So, you know, so they were all up there drunk and everything, and that's how this all started as well. Just that he was bored one night and there wasn't enough things for them to do. So Nathan was 17, he was in Pullman, and I actually felt like I was getting a bit of a break. I went in and seen him, because of course I did, because he's my son. Gave him money, you know, made sure he had everything that he needed. He was reading in Pullman, you know, like he was colouring in, he was doing artwork. He was just, like, trying to keep himself sorted, because they locked you up for 23 hours a day, you know, and this was prior to COVID. So Nathan got out of prison, and try to think of the timeline. So my son, my older son, had turned to drink because he couldn't obviously cope with what was going on with Nathan. He really couldn't cope with the drug dealers. The police had came and put the door in, and he hadn't answered the door because they weren't. He didn't know who they were. He was just absolutely, like, feared, and he just the way they treated them when they came in the door as well. You know, they wanted, you know, did you know what the tablets were on the side? You know, that was my daughter's medication. Did you know the number to my safe? Well, you know, it's my safe. Why would you know the number? You know, when Nathan was younger, he knew my number and everything from my bank. He obviously watched what passwords I put in, and the wee bugger went to the bank and withdrew £200 out, and went on a wee merry spending spree. Got a taxi to the local shopping centre and had a great time. He then went on my Facebook and went on my eBay, and he was ordering stuff on eBay, and then he went into my PayPal, which was linked to it, to pay for it. So of course I was raging at this point, and the one and only time I reached out to his dad to try and take him, so that he would just, because he was uncontrollable at that time, and he was 12 years old doing that. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, his dad took him, had him for a week, and then brought him back. And Nathan was raging at me that I'd actually sent him to his dad's. But I was flabbergasted at the fact he could have done something like that. So, of course, to this day, I have trouble with passwords all over the place because of him, because I would have to keep everything hidden under lock and key. I learned not to carry any money with me because that would go missing. He stole everything from the house, sold my iPad on the street to a drug dealer. I managed to get his sister's one back. He sold anything of value in the house. He sold his brother's PS4 games and left them with just the PS4. He stole the Xbox that had been in line in the living room for ages to play DVDs. He stole that too. If it wasn't nailed down, he was off with it. Half my cutlery and my dishes ended up in bushes around where we live. You know, he was always out with some kind of weapon. So I used to really panic with him, you know, and say, look, for goodness sake, that's got my prints on it as well as yours. And he wasn't bothered. He was just having the time of his life, eh? So he pawned my jewellery as well when my daughter was in the sick kids. I was quite hurt about that. But then my older son obviously had a problem with the drink, and I had to, you know, I had to support him. He did a lot of it himself, but he needed help to go into A&E and go into the places that were going to help him, in the addiction services in Weldas. So he just felt like it was torture. He couldn't cope with it. You know, he'd went through about 3 hospital admissions where he was detoxed with diazepam, and he couldn't cope when he came out. His anxiety was all over the place. He was really ill. He just couldn't cope with the way he felt. He'd put on 5 stone. He was just feeling rubbish, and his anxiety was through the roof. So anyway, he ended up in the Ritson, and he got out about the day before Christmas in 2019, I think. Yeah, 2019. And he was good. And Nathan was out, and I had both boys back, and they were doing fine. Obviously Nathan went back down the road he was on, but it wasn't really that bad. I had feelings that he was smoking heroin, and I had asked him, and he eventually admitted to me that he was smoking heroin. And I had said, you know, look, he says, but I would never inject it because I don't like needles. And I was like, well, you know, you shouldn't be touching anything. But he just never listened. He had, I think he had about 4 houses they put him in, and they moved him each time because he was scared, because people used to be after him. He was well known where we lived as well, which was quite a good thing when he died, because everybody knew who he was, and it shocked everybody. So we got to my daughter's 16th birthday, and the day after it, I got cancer, and I was really took the wind out my sails. I'm usually really placid and calm, but this wiped me out. There was nothing that could have prepared me for that. I was just so utterly shocked. And I told the kids, and Nathan in particular he was howling. He thought I was going to die, you know, the minute that word was mentioned, and he just couldn't cope with it. So he then went on a really dark path, and he was taking street Valium. But at the time, you know, I didn't really think that was that bad. But it was really bad, because then I realised that they put everything into that. It wasn't just like diazepam that you got off the doctor. And one of the ingredients in it was Islam, which was killing people, but I didn't realise that. So he was taking that, and he was, some days I would see him in Christmas, the last Christmas before he died, he came to my house. He'd hitchhiked from a hotel in Ingliston, and had got here. He was completely out of his face, and him and his girlfriend were arguing on the phone, and he was crying, and I wasn't working, but somebody had went off sick, so I decided to do the shift. and I actually couldn't go and leave him there because he couldn't stay in my house overnight with the kids because they couldn't cope with him. And secondly, I didn't want to leave him there while I went to work. So I phoned the police and I said that like I was going to work in the hospital in a COVID ward, and my son was outside. He was known to take drugs, blah blah blah, and they were at my door really fast, and they came and they took him to his back to his hotel so that he was safe. And I never heard from him for 2 days, and I was upset about that. But like, I thought he was obviously angry with me for phoning the police. And then just the usual Nathan would come by and say, "Oh, I know you did that for my well-being and my mental health, Mum. You know, I'm sorry that happened." It must have been really sad for him because a couple of days before I'd gave him all his presents, and he was really grateful for everything and he was happy. And then that day, as I say, he turned up and he was upset, sad, and he'd came in the house. I'd let him in. I'd offered him stuff, but he was wanting to sit outside. We were all stressed out with him. So I went to work and that was it. And then, like, Nathan used to, like, we used to argue with him, and I'd say to him, "Oh my God, I've had enough of you today. Just go away now." And he'd come back the next day and it'd be like nothing had happened. He'd apologise to me. "I love you, Mum. Sorry about that." And I'd say, "It's all right," because it was all right. 2 weeks before he died, he was outside on my bathroom, outside my bathroom window, unblocking pipes for me. He would do anything for me. He really would. If I wanted anything fixed or done, he would do it. I remember when I got a printer, and he printed off a £20 note because he'd started printing £20 notes and using them. And honestly, when I seen him doing that, I could have battered him, but like I actually hid the paper so he couldn't use it again. So he'd say, "Where's the paper?" And I'd say, "Oh, I've hid it because you're not doing that again. I'm not having that in my printer." So, but they had their own printer and they had their own stuff and they were away doing what they wanted, which was bad, but that was Nathan. What I didn't know didn't hurt me. So I never wanted to find out what he was up to half the time. Anyway, I was working. He turned up one Saturday and he was really in a bad state, just like he'd been on the Christmas day. He'd got a lot of stuff that he wanted to show me, and I don't know where he'd got it from, so I kind of thought it was maybe stolen. And he wanted to leave it in my cupboard. And I said, "No, Nathan, you can't do that because I don't know where it's came from." And of course, he just got up. He was really angry. He was face planting on the floor. He was, his phone fell half a dozen times. And the amount of phones he had was unbelievable that I had to give him over the years. He went outside and he's standing in the drive and he's saying, "Do you ever look at me and see your son?" And that broke my heart. I just felt totally, totally bad. And I said, "Of course I do," but he stomped off. So I felt terrible and tried to phone him, but he wasn't. I got a lot of googly gog back because obviously he wasn't in a fit state to type. The following day it was Mother's Day and I was at my sister's and he phoned and he said he'd lost his phone, and I said, "Oh, I actually know where it is, because somebody's phoned me." And he said, "Oh, thanks, Mum." He says, "I love you." Didn't even know it was Mother's Day, but if he hadn't made that phone call, the Saturday day would have been my last memory of him, and that would have been, oh God, I think that would have destroyed me.
Yeah.
Knowing that like I did see him as my son. You know, if anything, I was probably the only person that saw him as my son, you know, because a lot of family couldn't deal with it either. It was hard. And as his sister said, he was not the boy that she grew up with when he died. She didn't even know him anymore, which was really sad. So I was on a 12-hour shift at the hospital, and I was I just came off a 12-hour shift, and I was going to bed, and I looked at my clock because I thought my phone, because I wanted to see how long I would have to sleep, you know, like, because I had another 12-hour shift the next again day. And it was 21:21, and I went to sleep. And about 11:30, the door went. And I don't even know why or how anything happened. But I remember going to the door and thinking, I'll go to the window. And the police had been at my house so many times before. Anyway, I had actually made a decision not to let them in. But that night, I don't know what was wrong. I just opened the door and they were chatting away to me. And they said, "Can we come in?" And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't ken what they were going to say to me or anything. I just thought they were looking for Nathan. And they sat down, they put their hats on the table, and I seen all this. And then I heard the words, sadly passed away. And the whole of me just froze, and I was shaking. And the tongue on the roof of my mouth was really dry, so it felt like I couldn't speak. I was in total shock. And I just couldn't get over it. My phone pinged, and my neighbour had messaged me and said there was loads of kids in my drive. Was I okay? And I had answered her saying, "No, Nathan's dead." And I don't know.
How can you comprehend something like that, but Tracy?
I know. And then my other friend, she had like came. She had phoned because she'd heard. It was all over the place by this time, you know, everybody knew, and they were just telling me. And I was shaking. I stayed up the whole night. His girlfriend had been outside in the drive. I let her in. She was howling. And that was the first time I'd even heard of the guy that Nathan was with when he died. And his sister came down the stairs, his brother came downstairs, totally in shock. My daughter phoned her dad. She's quite good in a difficult situation. So she phoned her dad, and he even asked me over the conversation after Nathan had died, that's why didn't I phone him? Do you know?
As if that's important at that stage.
You know, it wasn't important. You know, I phoned him when she was on life support, and he got to the hospital, and one of the first things I heard him saying to his mum was, "Just leave Tracy alone. I've never seen her like this before." So that was when my daughter was on life support. So how did he expect me to feel, when Nathan had died, and I was in a right state. So I stayed awake all night. My son was on the couch, my daughter was in my bed, and I sat at the bottom of my bed on a chair even. And I just thought, what am I going to do? And I was crying, and I was like, didn't know what to do. So obviously I was waiting until somebody was online so I could talk to them. My family knew already. I'd tried to speak to some of them. my sister had came up. She was in total shock too. I think everybody was in shock.
That must have been a fear that you'd had a fear many, many times over, like when Nathan
I
was
know, but I just
disappeared.
never thought it would happen.
That's what I mean. So the shock of it actually happening must have been like a brick, like hitting you in the face.
I know. One time when he was about 14, he'd went away out, and this was about 12:30, and he'd been at the local nightclub, and he ended up getting slashed by a bottle, and his arm was all cut and mangled and everything. He ended up in the hospital. Do you know, the police came up to tell me that this had happened and that they were willing to take me down to the hospital. So they waited till I got dressed and everything, and then we went down. But even that day, I never thought that anything would have happened to him. Do you know, you just, I don't know. Maybe at the back of your mind, you must feel that there is that call coming, and that's what's going to happen. But, you know, he was too young. He was only 20.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's obviously upset. In the land of like numbness, and all these flowers started arriving, which was nice of people. But there were so many flowers, and God, I had to go and buy vases and borrow vases, and it was just like a florist in my living room. Lots of people supporting us. People would message me and I'd say, just come and see me. And they'd come up, and it was a lot better me saying that, because it meant that they weren't feeling awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And I still had support, still had people at the door, So Nathan was using these drugs to self-medicate because he was really, his mental health was really shit. You know, his sister was diagnosed with autism at 7 years old, and by this time Nathan was 10, and that was another trauma to his life, because obviously his dad had left. He'd had to have like counselling at 7, and then 3 years later his sister was getting all this attention. People were coming in, you know, like she was moved to a different school, you know, she was getting like loads of stuff from funding, and even though he got like stuff as well, he just never seemed to get over the fact that things were changing. And then when he got bullied, that was another trauma. I think that was the 3 biggest traumas for Nathan as he was growing up. And probably going into homeless was another trauma for him, but obviously, you know, that was his doing. So obviously he died, flowers were arriving and everything. And I had been talking to a guy called Aidan Martin, and about the same time, I seen that I'm trying to think of the timeline here. At the same time, I think round about then I obviously knew of Willie, and I obviously reached out to him.
How did that come about then, Tracy, if you don't mind me asking? I was going to be quiet, but you're coming towards the ending part, just so I don't mind.
Yeah.
But how did it come about? Because that was such a brave decision to take, to be able to film Nathan's funeral and put it on STV News, etc.
Yeah.
Was that was Aidan asking you about that?
Yeah, Aidan was right into like Twitter, and he'd put on Twitter that he was, because I'd asked Aidan to speak at Nathan's funeral.
Yeah.
And he had put on Twitter that he was going to be speaking at a young guy's funeral, only 20 years old. Aidan is a recovering addict as well, and he's also an author. He'd written a book.
Yep.
I'd bought the book, and like I thought, gosh, you know, this guy's not going to want to have anything to do with me. He's an author, you know, he's written a book. But no, it wasn't the case at all. He's a really good friend now.
Yeah.
But so he said that, but he was also very good in saying, like, I didn't want to upset you, just say if you didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
He supported me. He was here when I got interviewed. He didn't sit with me or anything. He just said it was better if I did it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
He was there all the time. He came with me to the funeral parlour to speak to the humanist. Nathan was a Catholic, but I just never thought that he just never needed the Catholic service. He was too young, and his life was going to be blown open. I wanted people to know the kid he was.
Yeah.
And then I wanted people to know what he was like as a teenager. So we went with the BBC and then Sky News and everywhere else that came in. I was a bit overwhelmed. I hadn't even told anyone that I was getting it filmed. I think I told my kids, and that was it. So everybody that turned up that day had no idea.
Right.
And Aidan obviously did his part at the funeral, and that everything went the way I wanted it to go. Nathan's funeral, his coffin was purple. It just, that was his favourite colour, so I made sure he had a purple coffin.
That's such a powerful image, because like Nathan was only 20-year-old.
Yeah, I made sure it went right round the streets where he used to, frequent.
Yeah,
good. It went past the chapel, but like, and then even when it went into the crematorium, the police were at the end of the line of cars, which I thought was really funny, because I could just imagine Nathan shouting, "There's the police," swearing. But apparently that was a mark of respect from the police.
Yeah.
But they just went in and then came out again. But it was quite funny at the time. After the funeral, how I got through the days was that I joined various groups online. I joined Scott Balder's group, and I joined Willie's group, and I started talking to them. I started joining all the Zooms, and how I slowly recovered from it all was to think of Nathan when he was younger, because it didn't hurt as much remembering all the lovely wee memories that you had. So that helped me a lot. As we went further on into the, my son was obviously he's now 3.5 years sober, and he went to the Ritz to get help, and he's now at uni. He's doing great. And
that must be difficult, but when you think about it, even your two sons were lost in addiction, alcohol and drugs, but you've lost one of your sons, and your other son is now in recovery, doing amazing at a university, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Mark's done absolutely outstanding to go from that addiction and then go through the Ritzon Clinic and now go on to hopefully help other people as well. That must make me so proud as well.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's great. He's helping a charity called, he's volunteering with a charity called Cards, I think it is, in Edinburgh. Right. And he's helping people that are, still drinking, but are still wanting to go through rehab. So he's trying to help them, which is great. I mean, it's great that he's doing that. So yeah, he's doing great now.
I mean, it was just after Nathan's funeral when you'd given stories to the media. I think it appeared in Edinburgh Live at the same time I was telling my story about getting out into recovery as well. You reached out to me and you shared a bit of Nathan's story back then. And it's been since then that we've become friends and going on to do different things together, like the groups that we're part of now. or we've been to memorial days and things like that for the drug deaths, memorials, etc., etc. You help a lot of people. You're obviously a nurse for the viewers that maybe not know that, but since
Clinical
Nathan's
support.
clinical support, but since Nathan's death, you also, like you say, touched on there, you reached into the recovery
Yeah.
world, and you now also volunteer for CGL in Bathgate. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Well, I just make tea and I chat to them and coffee, and it's good. I'm also at in the family and friends night as well, you know, to help support other parents, and I like that as well. I like all of it. It's just, it heals me being in that place. It's like when I went for the interview, they told me they would look after me, and that's one thing I took away from it, is that they're going to look after me. So yeah, I love it there. I do stigma talks with Will Das as well, because obviously the biggest stigma that I've ever encountered was when I took Mark to A&E all the time. It was
that from the nurses and doctors there, or the public?
Not so much the nurses, reception, and some of the nurses, yeah. They just thought he was just another young laddie, you know, like getting peed every weekend, and didn't realise that there's trauma behind it, you know, it was horrible.
You touched on earlier on, Tracy, sorry for interrupting. You touched on earlier on when Nathan was in Pullman for 21 months, I think you said. That gave you a sense of peace in a way, because you didn't have to worry and stress out all the time. And it allowed Nathan the clarity. He was doing like drawings and poetry and things like that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But sorry, what was I going to say? Sorry, I interrupted you there, Tracy. Wouldn't be like me.
No.
So, reaching out into the recovery world, you've got so many good friends in there now. You've got, like with the Zooms, Gemma and other people as well, that we all help each other out on 3 times a week. We go into the Zooms. What else? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to my list of questions actually. But what helps you get through the more difficult times? What was it like, for example? What I mean by that is when Nathan was growing up, what was it like for Mark and Ariana and yourself to have to go through basically what his life was like, an addiction that was coming to your front door? That must have been really difficult for Mark and Ariana as well.
It was stressful, you know, they couldn't cope with it. Ariana felt like she'd lost her brother like many years before, you know. He started when he was 13 and ended when he was 20. You know, like there was always issues with Nathan. You know, always.
And you touched on as well when Nathan was 5 that his father had left the family home, you and him had split up. That must have affected all of them differently, but it must have been a big...
I think it did, but, you know, my daughter was young, so...
Yeah.
My daughter was young, and my older son, he was quite hurt, but, like, he didn't show it as much. Nathan was... He was devastated that his dad had left. And I mean, when his dad left, he was away for 8 months down in England somewhere before he found a house up here. So, yeah.
How difficult was it after that, like being a single parent with 3 children, bringing them up with Ariana having autism, and then later on in their teenage years with the difficulties in Nathan, and try to juggle that with being a working parent as well? It can't have been easy at all.
I know, it was a nightmare. I was forever in the schools.
And then when Nathan went into school, he got bullied as well. So that was another traumatic event that would have affected him massively as well.
I know, it was horrible. He slept on my floor in my bedroom with 2 quilts for about, I think it was about 8 weeks. And, you know, he used to like wet himself at night as well. You know, like he was really quick at toilet training. Everything was great. And then his dad left, and then boom, all this stuff started happening.
And then you said he had counselling when he was 7-year-old as well. How long was that for? Did it help him any? It was a bit young,
I
isn't
don't
it?
know how long it was for, but it was for a few weeks. It was in Whitburn somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I had to take him or get somebody else to take him. But yeah, he got a lot out of it, and he also, because of my daughter having autism, he also went with the West Lothian Young Carers, so they helped him as well. He also, as he moved on from that and went into high school, he was also the Youth Action Project in West Lothian. They really looked out for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that place was just, you know, they never gave up on him. Never. Right to the very last day, never gave up on him. When it was COVID, they used to go with food parcels to his house and everything. And, you know, they were there for him. Yeah.
And then
Between
when he was at high school, that's really when he's just started dabbling in the usual things that teenagers do, like the cannabis, the ecstasy, the
yeah,
alcohol with friends. So it's just normal teenager stuff, peers with your peers and your friends, etc., etc.
uh-huh.
When did you recognise that was becoming an issue when it was leading on to further things?
Well, it was his behaviour as well. It was his behaviour, the fact he was staying out all night. You know, I couldn't get him in. You know, maybe he was late by about an hour, you know. Then he'd start coming in after midnight. And, you know, it was just Nathan. He was just out there. I'd phone him, you know. He'd just like, he'd either like no answer his phone or turn his phone off, which used to really infuriate me. But yeah, it was when he went missing overnight, and you know the pattern of like everything, you know, like that he was doing. He was out
And
all
did
the
you
time.
understand back then that the Nathan who was that lost an addiction was different, obviously, to your son? But it must have been still hard to differentiate between when your son's maybe getting angry or stealing things that's going to hurt you, pawning your jewellery. That is difficult for a parent to.
Yeah, that was difficult, but Nathan wasn't like that all the time, you know. It was only
No.
the last sort of like, I'd say the last 6 months before he died that I could really see him being, you know, like being an addict.
Yeah, and I mean that was fueled. That was made a lot worse for him as well when he found out about you having cancer, didn't it? I mean, it really scared him
you know,
when you got diagnosed with that.
yeah. But he's, aye, there was something else you said there that I was going to go back on.
I'll try and see if I can see my questions, but I was just asking about like when he was in high school and things like that.
Yeah,
He
I know.
started off with the usual list of things that a lot of
Well,
teenagers do try.
on into the jewellery.
Yeah.
When I told Nathan that I had cancer, you know, he was obviously upset. He was really lucid, and we had a long chat that day, and he promised me that he would never steal from me again, and he held his word.
Yeah.
He never stole anything from me again, and never really asked me for any money. Because I always told him I was skinny anyway, even though when I wasn't, but I just didn't want to enable him. The only thing he stole, which was quite funny, was it was like a butterscotch ice cream, and I'd bought it, and I went to go and get it, and it wasn't bloody there because my freezer's outside in a cupboard, and I kept saying to him, "Oh, did you like that? Did you like that ice cream? Did you like it?" Because we had the same sort of humour, me and Nathan.
Yeah.
Well, we liked the same stuff, to watch the same stuff, you know. Liam Neeson, we were both into all the films and everything. You know, I even watched once a series of the Britain's Next Top Model, the whole series with him. You know, because he was a good kid to sit down and watch things, you know.
Yeah,
And
I've seen some of the pictures when he was posing when he was watching Britain's Next Top Model and things like that.
he's
I mean,
funny.
what age was it that Nathan started to use heroin, dabble in heroin and
I'd
things like
say
that?
probably about 6 months before he died.
Yeah.
Aye.
So it was a short period before it that he went on to the class A harder drugs, for example,
Yeah.
with heroin. And was he getting a prescription for methadone at the time as well?
No, I
No,
don't know how
he never actually
methadone
had a
was.
prescription.
No, I don't know how methadone was in his system.
Mm-hmm.
So there was atizolam, methadone, um, sertraline, which he was prescribed,
Mm-hmm.
and cocaine. that was in his system when he died.
Yeah, and it was around about that age, obviously, we're getting to 16, 17, that's when the law started being able to punish him more, and he was getting put in places like Pullman. What's
Yeah.
your opinion about Young Offenders Institutes? Not just Pullman in particular, but that whole breeding ground, in my opinion, like jail, it only makes people a lot of the time come out and be even worse with their addictions or their lifestyle choices, etc., etc. It's not a very good. It's meant to be to rehabilitate people and help them have a better quality of life when they come out. And
Well,
I
I've
mean,
a
if you're
lot to
locked up
say on
23
that.
hours a day, then what good is
Yeah.
that?
First of all, they're locked up for 23 hours a day in there. You know, what are they teaching them? There's no workshops, no classes for them to learn. How can it be rehabilitation just locking somebody up for 23 hours a day? They're just going to, their mental health is just going to go crazy, and then they're going to come out and do the same things again. They don't get support when they come out. It's just like a big turnaround, and they go back in again. You know, and I do believe that Nathan would have went back into Pullman had he no died. But you know that it's horrible. I don't know how Pullman, for instance, won't let people go in services go in and do workshops. I think it's terrible, because you should be trying to catch the young folk.
Definitely.
Because in the older prisons, like Sockton and all that, I mean, you get drugs in there. Probably get more drugs in the prisons than you do out in the streets.
Yeah.
That people can get addicted to heroin in the jail.
Yeah, easily.
You know, it doesn't take them to be outside to get addicted. You know, so it's more it's more in the older jails that they would get addicted to stuff like that. But like, you know, Nathan, he I think they would crush the tablets up, his friends, and they would soak them in, like obviously put them in a kettle of water, then put the piece of paper in the water, then dry the paper out, then write a letter. And Nathan would get it, and then he would just eat it.
Yeah, it's crazy how they get the drugs in now, isn't it?
And they asked me to do it one time, and I was like, not a chance. So
I mean, like you say, but they do. They come out of Pullman and places like that, and then there's no aftercare. There's no support there for them to help them get connected to society again, and whatever issues they're going through at the time to reintegrate into society. But not only just that, I mean, would you say that Nathan was let down? Because I know that you've mentioned a few services. He had a few help.
I think he was let down because
14.
I think he was let down because when COVID came around, everything shut down, and he just moved to Broxburn at the time, and he was meant to go and register with a doctor. So like, this wasn't on Nathan's agenda. You know, you didn't. Kids like Nathan, they weren't going to be practical.
No.
So like, I had to take control of it again and register him at my doctor, and just explain to them that no, he's not capable of looking after himself, because his mental health's so bad. But the fact that COVID came along and you never ever got an appointment was even worse, you know. So services did fail him then, because, you know, that was in 2020.
And there was, and back then, because of the everywhere being closed with COVID and that's when there was a spike in this Atizalam, these fake Valium, so-called fake Valium out in the streets. So that's when it got a lot more serious. I mean, and it took a while for people to even understand that they weren't the real Valium. That's what a lot of people who weren't maybe taking drugs or that at the time with COVID. I knew people in their 60s that would take them for anxiety to get out the door, just thinking they were Valium, and that was for their anxiety. And I still know that it goes on getting sold in schools, etc., etc. And people, the vast majority of people back then anyway, would take them without being ignorant to the dangers. Like myself included, I used to take up to 100 or so of these tablets like Smarties, and it's so sad, especially in cases like Nathan's when he's no longer here. But when you're lost in addiction like that, you don't actually care if you live or die anyway. Because you're lost in that world of pain and that torment and trauma or whatever it is you've been through, and you're just without hope and things like that. It's a horrible place to be, isn't it? And especially being through homeless situation as well, through COVID, isolation, and not getting the support you needed either. It's a really hard thing to go through, isn't it? When you're suffering an addiction, especially. So it was March 2021 when Nathan passed away, and he was in a police cell, I believe you mentioned before, a couple of days before it as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. So Nathan got picked up with street Valium in possession. So he was with his pal, and they got locked up for the night, and then they were to appear in court on the Monday morning. So that was Mother's Day that they'd been picked up after he'd phoned me. And the police did phone me to tell me that Nathan had been picked up, because he always wanted to let me know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, phone my mum. So, so I knew he had been inside. And then obviously the Monday he tried to send me a message, but it was it was googly gog, because he probably couldn't do it. And on the Tuesday morning he'd phoned me, and I was going to work, so I said, look, I'm at work, you know, told you to catch up with me after my shift tonight. But obviously he died that night, so it was just a shame. But like, yeah, I did, because the police just came and said these words, sadly passed away. I needed to find out for myself what had happened. So, you know, I used I can't remember her name, really. It's like going out of my head. Angela Constance.
Yeah.
I wrote to Angela, and she'd met me on several occasions, so she knew exactly who I was. And I had written to her to help with the Procurator Fiscal and police, because the police said that I was not privy to the internal investigation that they'd had about Nathan. And well, my questions were: had he been seen by a nurse? Had he been taken to the hospital? Because obviously he was really under the influence of these tablets, and I just wanted to find out what happened, but they wouldn't. And you know, I also wanted to know how the ambulance service hadn't responded, you know, for such I think it was over 20 odd minutes. And I was like, I just wanted answers. So I went round to find all my own answers for everything, even visiting the house where Nathan died. And I found out all my answers. So everything was all right after that.
But it is terrible that you had to go out and do to find the answers yourself. That's your son. You should be privy to every single bit of information you need answered.
The thing is, they just tell you that your son's died, and then that's it. That's it. I got a phone call to tell me what was in his system, and that was it. I don't think I got his report from the fiscal for, like, I don't even know when it was, but it was.
It took ages.
It was over a year anyway, because I thought it would come at Christmas, you know, and then it would come at his anniversary, and then thankfully it wasn't any of these two times. So, but yeah.
So how has the grieving process been for you back in 2021 to now? That's obviously different for every single person, but your ways of coping with that, how do you cope with that grieving process?
Well, I'm back at work. Just got on with it. If I'm doing a 12-hour shift, which I usually do, I go out for Headspace myself. I don't go to a lunch or that with them. It's not that they're not supportive, it's just that I kind of need a quiet brain sometimes, and I can't explain it. It's just how I want. The kids in my family, my wee nieces and nephews, they help a lot because they're so innocent, and they're so funny. And you know, Isaac wanted to know if there was biscuits in Nathan's urn, you know. And when it was his 21st birthday, we went down with balloons, and the kids were so funny trying to hold the balloons, and you know, and I wasn't bothered that they weren't doing it properly, because I just thought it was funny. So the kids make me laugh, and then obviously reaching into the cover was a big part for me.
Yeah.
You know, every time I speak about Nathan, I'm raising awareness.
And I mean, you were in Phoenix Futures the week before last, sharing Nathan's story as well, weren't you? That must have been very powerful. Phoenix Futures, for the viewers watching, is a rehab facility in Glasgow that our good friend Scott Bulger, who we mentioned earlier on, he was in there in 2019 getting himself into recovery, and now he's back there now working as a support worker and helping the clients and residents of that rehab find recovery. And you went in to share your story, or Nathan's story as well, a couple of weeks ago, and the family group. Can you tell us a little bit about how that went?
Oh, it was really emotional. We're in a big circle, and I didn't think they would hear me. They even got me a purple chair to sit in, which was nice. You know, it was just emotional. There was a lot of feedback where a young guy said that he never felt emotional before about any of the stuff he did. A lot of young ones saying that, like, now they can understand what their mum went through. There was people that just broke down, and it was sad. But like after it, you know, everybody hugged me, and you know, they were all saying thanks. You know, they were all saying thanks. It was emotional. I could have stayed there actually.
You wanted to adopt one of the residents, I believe, a young guy,
eh? Oh God, I said I'll be his mother. So, but
it is very powerful being able to use such a tragic event, losing Nathan like you did, but to be able to use that in a way that hopefully it will show other people that are lost in addiction right now that that's the route that they're heading down if they continue doing what they're doing, and the effects it's going on family members like yourself, your Ariana and Mark, and further your other family members as well. That's what when I went and shared my story in Phoenix, that's the power that I took for it, is the effect that it has on family. And indeed, when I first met you, Tracy, it wasn't until I first met you and I first truly understood the stress and the worry that I'd given to my mum over the years with using, etc., etc. But it is the most positive way that you can use the tragedy of Nathan's death to share his story, keep his name alive, and the hope that it will help someone else not maybe have to go down that route and have to go through that pain of losing their child.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's sad. You can never break a parent's bonds.
No.
No, so it's.
I mean, there's people out there. Oh, my kid done this or my kid done that. Then I disown them, and I'll be honest. I've done a lot of bad things in my time, like stealing, etc., from my mum mainly. And I would just say that if my mum ever disowned me, I think that would have put me over the edge, rather than anything else, because she was like you were with Nathan. You were his one constant that he could always rely on.
Yeah.
So if you take that away from someone who's already suffering from addiction or trauma or whatever, then that's just going to maybe be the breaking point for them. You know what I mean? So there's nothing more that you could, like we touched on before and you've said before, there's nothing that you need to regret about doing differently or not supporting your son, because you've done everything humanly possible and he knew that you were there for him, which is the most important thing,
Yeah.
So what's next for you then, Tracy? As there, like, you continue with your CGL and getting more involved with things like in that route?
Yeah. More public speaking, more awareness. Yeah.
You're going to be talking with NHS, I believe, soon as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So we are. Yeah.
And then you're a busy woman. You're also a clinical assistant in St John's Hospital, or a hospital in West Lothian. I shouldn't have named that. Sorry, Tracy.
You're funny.
Just realised what I says there, but never mind. Well, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing Nathan's story on the live tonight. Well, like I say, we've done a live. It was a year ago, almost to the week. I was waiting to come on at night, and I've got a memory up on Facebook when me, you, and Scott done it a year ago. But because we were in the same place, using the same devices, and me having the technical issues that I had back then it was a disaster, to be honest.
I know.
So I'm glad that you've been able to come on tonight and do it this way and then get
I
Nathan's
remember
story out.
the time I did come on a live by mistake.
Oh, I know, eh?
And I was
Press
like,
the button by accident and the panic in your face. I'm like, oh.
I know, and you kept me on there as well. So yeah, but no problem.
No, that is, it's really important that we hear people's lived experience journeys, and whether it's such a sad, tragic story like Nathan's, who's sadly no longer here, or whether it's people like myself and Scott, etc., Gemma, coming on and sharing their lived experience of addiction. It's so important that we hear the families' views and opinions and what it meant to them and how it affected them. We've heard how it affected Mark, who obviously turned to alcohol for a period of time, but now who thankfully has found the strength to get into recovery, and he's now flourishing in life, and that's amazing to see as well.
Yeah.
So again, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on tonight and sharing Nathan's story. And it's honestly, I thank you again for being my friend as well. You're one of my best friends in my recovery, and for the viewing people of maybe know with Tracy for 10 or so months, maybe even a year, when I wasn't employed, etc., paid my internet to keep me talking online and to keep me what's the word I'm trying to look for? Yeah, to keep me talking online, basically supporting people and all that type of good stuff. And our friendship is went from strength to strength from there, and I'm sure we'll work together many times again in the future. Whatever it is, we're trying to break stigma over or to help support other people that may be lost in addiction in some way, mate. But anyway, I think unless there's anything else you would like to say, I think that's us for tonight, and I'll just end it in my usual way.
No, I'm fine. Daisy's sparked out.
Apart from that, you're working tomorrow, so you need to get to bed soon.
I do.
But so I did want to say thank you again, and thank you to the viewers as well. Just to let you know, Tracy, the reason there was no comments up on the screen is because it'll not let me put them up on the screen. Right. I think what came up, the message that's coming up with me is that my Facebook is set to friends only.
Right.
So I need to put it to public after this, then it'll go public. There was comments because I could see them on my phone, but I couldn't put them up in the podcast itself. But never mind, you'll be able to go back and see them, and then I'll work out how to put my profile is public, but it's only sharing to friends. So I'll figure that out and get out there. But once again, Paul, thank you so much again for coming on. And I would like to say thank you to the viewers for watching and commenting. And all that is left for me to say is, it's okay not to be okay. But like Tracy and I just did, we need to talk about it. Thanks very much, folks. Catch you on the next podcast. Bye just now.